World building is a big task, and making a world that seems real and immersive is something else entirely. Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Bridget. I am a writer and filmmaker, and I'm here to help you create the most engaging and immersive and authentic stories that you possibly can. In this video, we're going to be talking about how to make your fantasy worlds, sci-fi worlds, overall storytelling worlds more immersive for your audience. I am breaking this down into 5 steps/parts, and each one will have a prompting question that you can write down and answer for yourself in your own time. Now, this video is not going to really contain spoilers, but there are shows that I'm going to mention, and some of them do contain spoilers. So, in particular, these are the main shows that I'm going to be talking about. If you haven't seen them, just be warned, maybe spoilers. The shows that I will be talking about are WandaVision, Avatar: The Last Airbender, His Dark Materials, the Hunger Games franchise, and Arcane. So, let's get right into it. Part 1, start with the emotional core of the world. Now, the first thing I want you to do is throw away the checklist of making a world. Building a world is an art, not a science. And I know that seems a little bit counterintuitive or like contradictive with this whole video premise because I'm giving you prompts and stuff to make a world, but hear me out. The idea of creating a world, how you want to start, is how it serves your story. A world, in the narrative sense, is not the same as just a world we inhabit. The idea of a fantasy or science fiction world, anything that makes your world different, is to help your characters through their story and make the story different. At the beginning of creating your world, you want to focus on the emotion that your world is creating and really the tone of your story, because your world is really the visual, and in the way of like prose and novels, anything that is written instead of shown on a screen, the visceral reaction, the description of everything. For this, I'm going to take the example of WandaVision. Now, this one is very on the nose, but we're going to run with it for now, because this is literally, spoiler alert, a world that Wanda Maximoff created. So everything in this world is centered around her idea of the ideal life that she wanted with her, were they married in the actual Avengers? I don't think they were actually married, but with her, at least, boyfriend, Vision. So her whole creation of this world is around one idea, one emotion of grief. This idea of longing for something. So the idea of nostalgia played a huge part in the writing process, and the creation of these different pockets of time. They all had different nostalgic value. In my own writing, I am working on a story that is all about isolation and connection. These two polar opposites that are illustrated through the world by the atmosphere of 2 different locations. There is a land that is quite poor, but at the same time their community is flourishing and they are very supportive of each other. On the other hand, we have a city that is prospering financially and is like so captivating to the eyes, but the people inside it are very cold and very closed off from each other. There is this idea of the landscape and the culture being formed around the dynamics of all these people. Both play a part, and one cannot exist without the other. And this would also play into where you put these places in your world. If there is a central hub, that doesn't necessarily mean it's central. It merely means that it is where everybody goes. So everything would revolve around that. as the city or the country was built. Connecting your world to the tone and the theme of your story makes your world feel less like a backdrop and more as a catalyst and something that shapes your character's personality even more. Now, the prompting question for this section is, how does your setting connect to the theme and your character's struggle through the story? Part 2, build your world through its people. Culture builds your world into something more than simply a setting. It also helps your world stand out as more than just a copy and paste of someone else's, and makes it into something completely new. Every culture has their own small rituals, their own routines, holidays. These are small things that create the daily lives of the people who live in this culture. For this section, I'm going to look at Avatar: The Last Airbender. Through the series, we get to see multiple cultures. We get to see the Water Tribe, Air Nomads from flashbacks, Fire Nation, Earth Kingdom, some of like the Swamp Benders, and the Desert, the Sandbender area. Anyway, I'm probably missing some. But all of these are so distinct from each other because of their culture. There is different food, there's different rituals, a lot of it, in Avatar, a lot of it seems to stand out from food, which is kind of fun. But also their architecture is so different. Their visual appeal is so distinct. And yes, their colors are very distinct from each other. Now I want to look at one episode specifically, and that is the episode of The Headband from season 3. This is season 3, episode 2, just to be specific. It's when Aang gets the chance to go and enroll in a Fire Nation school. Through this episode, we get to see how the children of the Fire Nation are educated and the overall propaganda, the overall censorship that they have. And we get to see the contrast between Aang's very carefree nature of growing up with the Air Nomads and the very restricted culture of the Fire Nation. And this especially stands out when Aang is told off for doing something with his feet while in music class. And this was literally just dancing. It is important to establish these differences within culture. The Air Nomads are so drastically different from the Fire Nation. Granted, the Air Nomads in this situation existed 100 years ago, but even without that separation of time, there would still be drastic differences between their way of life. Another example of Avatar's world building is shown in the 3rd episode of the overall show, which is the Southern Air Temple. We get to see this mainly through flashbacks because the Air Nomads sadly aren't around anymore in the present day of the show. And we get to see the overall aesthetic, the overall architecture, the food that they regularly consume, and we get to see their daily rituals, kind of. We get to see that the monks are meditating nearby. We get to see the fruitcakes that Monk Gyatso is preparing. And overall, we get to see the environment that they exist in. We even get to see the animals that live there. This is our first introduction to, we got to see the sky bison, obviously, with Appa, but we get to see the flying lemurs with Momo and the ones in the flashbacks. These flashbacks really create a feeling of warmth and love, which is directly contrasted, again, with the Fire Nation and their rigid regime. Everything that your characters encounter in their journey within any of the societies should tell them something about the society overall. The one thing that stands out for some reason is, again, in the episode The Headband, when Sokka comments that even the meat eats meat, which is such a throwaway line, but stands out to me because you have this society that is so regimented, and the fact that they're still on this treadmill of wanting more. They're so carnivorous that it's just an endless cycle. So it's like even their meat eats meat is like they're still hungry. There's still more that they're doing. There's still more on the way. I don't know. That was a side tangent that I just thought about, but I thought it was really cool. The way people spend their days in your story is so important to creating an immersive world because that is what makes it feel real. We want to feel like these people are still existing when we stop reading the book or like put it down for a little bit, or when we finish the show, when we finish one episode, we're like, oh yeah, they're still there. Or that the world still exists and you want to go back to it. The prompting question for this section is, what is the everyday life of the people in this society? Part 3, what's the difference test? In this section, I'm specifically talking to people who are creating fantasy or science fiction, because even if you are creating something similar to our world, but fantastical, I encourage you to use this one question, which is, what makes it different? I'm going to be using the example of historic materials. Now, spoiler alert for people who have not seen his Dark Materials from HBO or read the books. I think I'm just going to be spoiling the first book, The Golden Compass, so that's all. But we're going to be talking about the world. In his Dark Materials, the world that our characters are living in is similar to ours in a lot of ways. It is reminiscent of, I think it's supposed to be like 1940s. Something like that. But the key difference is that humans have this part of their soul personified in an animal companion that they call demons. And these are constant companions that, as they grow, choose a form of an animal that they stay in for the rest of their lives. So, this difference is not a throwaway difference. This is a crucial part of the story and is something that you need to implement into your world building. When you have a difference in your world from ours, it shouldn't just be anything. You need to choose it carefully. In the case of his Dark Materials, the difference of the world has such a major part that it could not be taken out. Because in his Dark Materials, the whole plot ends up revolving around this key difference. The inciting incident of The Golden Compass, the first book in the series, is when the main character, Lyra, her friend Roger, is kidnapped and she goes to find him. One of the big reveals of the story is that they are literally kidnapping children to try and sever the tie between the human and their demon companion, aka half of their soul. And they need to do this before the demon matures and the tie is like solidified. Therefore, they need children. So that's what led to Roger being kidnapped. If we did not have the demons, that would not happen. So everything in the plot line revolves around this. There is no way to have the Golden Compass without the demons existing in this world. It would be a totally different story. Now, the prompting question that I want you to think about is what makes your world different, and how does this difference play into the plot. I want you to make it as irreplaceable in the plot as the Golden Compass. It doesn't need to stay that way, but I want you to at least try and make it as important to the plot as humanly possible. Part 4, make the world an active force in the story. If you still feel that your world is a backdrop instead of an immersive place in your story, you need to make it active. This doesn't mean that your world is a sentient being. You don't need big-ass lion turtles from Avatar. Simply that the culture surrounding your characters plays a part in the story. For this, we're gonna look at the Hunger Games. In the world of the Hunger Games, I know everybody knows about it, but I'm gonna explain it just to illustrate it. In the world of the Hunger Games, we have 12 districts. Well, 13, but in most of it, we have 12 districts. And people are selected once a year to fight to the death. Fun stuff. Now, the idea of the districts is key to this. It is a part of the world that makes the characters have a harder time. Because our main character, Katniss, is from District 12, the lowest ranking district in all of the districts. So when she arrives to the capital, the idea that she is from the lowest district creates conflict. Nobody actually cares about her because they assume she's gonna be the first to go. District 12, gone. So her surroundings growing up, the fact that she is from District 12, helps her have the furthest to go. It puts her in the position of an underdog, which we all want to root for the underdog. We all do, because it's more interesting to see someone go from the bottom to the top. It's not as interesting if someone's at the top and just kind of stays there. You want them to have something of a roller coaster. In addition to this, putting Katniss in District 12, in the poorest district, gives her this sense of community. It gives her a sense of justice. Because she has seen the hardships of District 12, she knows that things are not good. She does not see things the same way as the people in the higher districts or in the capital. She's like, no, things suck in District 12. You guys are awful. So having her come in with that fresh perspective, with that kind of blunt view of everyone else, is refreshing. Now at the end of the first movie, we have Katniss getting some berries and giving half to PETA because they're gonna themselves. So, yay. But what I want to talk about with this moment is that it didn't come from nowhere. Because Katniss grew up in District 12, she was not going to let everyone die. She has the empathy that the other districts did not. She is not just there to survive. She volunteered for her sister. She was not willing to sacrifice herself or PETA for the capital's enjoyment because she grew up in District 12. I'm saying that 50 times, but it's true. The idea of the fact that she grew up there informs every single one of her actions. Okay? Your characters, where they grew up, the values that were put into their minds, influence every single action that they take through the story. Prompting question I want you to think about is, what values did your character learn from where they grew up, and how does that affect their actions through the story? Think about Katniss. Think about Katniss and those darn poison berries. Part 5, show, don't tell. Now, for this one, we are going to look at Arcane. I know I talked about this one so much in my last video, but we're not going as specific as we did in the last video. If you want to check that out, I talked a lot about Jinx, and yeah, if you haven't watched all of Arcane, there's big spoilers in that one. But if you want to hear my thoughts about the finale, you can go up here. Anyway, I'm gonna look at the world building of Arcane and the way that they show don't tell, because Beautiful. Now, in Arcane, we have two worlds. We have Piltover, the upper city, and then we have Zaun, the undercity. Now, although we never actually learn what happened at the beginning of the show, we don't actually get any backstory of Vi and Jinx / Powder's parents. We get a tiny bit of backstory in season 2, but we don't actually learn like specifically how they died. It's not important to the story. The whole idea of a revolution, like a revolt against Piltover from the Undercity, is really what sets the scene for the whole show, because the whole show is around this class indifference between the Undercity and Piltover. We don't need to be told that there is a giant feud between Piltover and the Undercity, aka Zaun, because we already saw it. We already know this. We got that in the first like 2 minutes with that creepy ass scene where Powder was singing through smoke. But when we do want to like talk a little bit about things, Arcane does a really great job at subtly or like sneakily putting this in. I'm gonna use an example of a great scene. I love this scene so much. When I watched it, I was like, oh, that's clever. That was a good one. This is the scene, I think it's the 4th episode of season 1. We have Silco in his office, seemingly talking to himself. He is talking about how Piltover has taken off with their technology, they're leaving them all behind, we don't know what we're doing anymore, we're just here in the Undercity, oh my gosh. And we're like, why are you info dumping on me? Why are you monologuing, bro? What's happening? And then the conversation takes a turn where we are shown that Jinx is up in the rafters in a little hideaway, and he's not actually talking to us, he's talking to her. And it's so good because we already know that Piltover is making strides. We know that Jace and Victor have been successful with all of their magic / hex tech stuff, but getting this information a little bit more directly, while at the same time not making it like a full like, fourth wall break where Silco's just like, oh, I hate this is terrible, we're just being left behind. We instead get a conversation where we also establish the relationship between Silco and Jinx, which we hadn't seen before this point. We also get to see everything in Arcane through character actions. This is so crucial. This is the epitome of show don't tell, because we don't need to have a long monologue about a character's feelings. Sure, we have some of those in Arcane, for example, the end of season 1 when Jinx is talking to Vi, but we don't have meaningless monologues. The whole monologue that Jinx has at Vi shows her descending into the character of Jinx, away from Powder and becoming this person who Vi was trying to pull her away from, but after Silco dies, it's just dissension. So the conversation is not a monologue of what she is feeling, it is her really trying to convince herself that this is the right path to go down. And it's the only way for her to deal with these emotions that she's feeling, to let go of the fact that her sister is never gonna feel the same way about her that she did when she was a child. I also wanna look at another character. I'm gonna stray a little bit away from Jinx just for like 2 seconds and look at Jace for a second. Now, in one of the later episodes, we have the team up of Jace and Vi, where they take on a bunch of Silco's factories. In their first attack, Jace ends up killing a kid who was working at the factory. And this scene is huge for the show don't tell method. In this scene, we see the stark difference between someone who has grown up in Piltover, aka Jace, and someone who has grown up in the Undercity, aka Vi. The attitudes towards collateral damage are very different. Jace is not willing to, in any circumstances, see collateral damage happen firsthand. He doesn't really acknowledge that there was collateral damage on his account. And on the other hand, we have Vi, who's so starkly aware of collateral damage and the price that is being paid for progress. So having these two characters both team up and then split up in the same scene or sequence is so dynamic and shows us so much about their characters. They have such similar goals, but their upbringing makes everything harder because they both want the same thing, but they can't deal with the same consequences. This is show don't tell at its finest. And just like study this scene for ages. It's so good. The prompting question I want you to think about is, how do your characters' actions and dialogue show your audience information about your world? Keyword is show. Now, I'm gonna quickly summarize what I said in this video because I know it's a long video. So here are the key 5 points. Connect your setting to your theme to create atmosphere. Paint your cultures with small details to build their history and daily lives. Differentiate your world with an element that serves your story. Form your world to motivate your characters' values. And finally, prioritize interpersonal dynamics instead of info dumping monologues. That is everything I have for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you are having fun creating a new world. A whole new world. Yes, I hope this helped you. If you want more writing advice, I do have an email list where you can get a free workbook that is all about gaining more writing confidence in just 10 minutes. It's completely free. Go down to the description and click the link and go get it for yourself. Without further ado, stay creative, happy writing, and I will catch you guys next week with another video. Bye.